"He lied to you, Nadine," the nurse shouted as the heart monitor flatlined. Nadine froze, his heartbeats fading while her hands on his chest, the paramedics storming in. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You don't understand. He was innocent." Outside, blue and red lights painted her face in betrayal. The first time Nadine Brown noticed Craig Crawford, he was struggling to open a can of soup with trembling hands. His blinds were half closed, his porch untouched by life. No kids' bikes, no laughter, just quiet defeat. Chicago winters could be merciless, but loneliness, Nadine always said, was colder. "Here," she'd said that day, taking the can from him without asking. "You're going to slice your hand clean open like that." Craig gave a weak smile. "Guess I'm not as handy as I used to be." That was 3 months ago. Since then, Nadine, 35, night shift nurse's aide at St. Mary's Hospital, had made Craig part of her daily rhythm. She'd bring soup from Mariano's, make sure he took his medication, and listen when he needed someone to fill the silence. People in the neighborhood knew her heart was bigger than her paycheck. She was the one who helped Miss Darlene down the street shovel snow, the one who organized care packages when the local Chase Bank clerk lost her husband. But caring came with a price. Her own rent at the South Shore Apartments was overdue. Her mother's insulin bills stacked like bricks on her kitchen counter. Yet every night she still knocked on Craig's door. "Evenin', Mr. Crawford," she'd call softly. "Evenin', Ms. Brown," he'd reply, the same weak smile. "You don't have to check on me every day," he'd say again and again. "It's Nadine," she'd correct him, setting the soup down. "And you don't have to pretend you're fine when you're clearly not." He'd laugh. A shallow sound, more air than joy. That night, Chicago rain tapped the window like restless fingers. Nadine sat across from him, folding laundry while he watched a rerun of Jeopardy! "You ever think about what you'd change if you could start over?" he asked suddenly. Nadine looked up. "I'd go to nursing school. Be a real nurse, not just an aide. My mama always said I had healing hands." Craig nodded slowly. She was right. His gaze lingered, sad, knowing. "You've done more for me than any doctor ever has." She smiled, brushing it off. "Don't say that. You just needed someone to show up." Outside, sirens wailed distantly, but Nadine didn't think much of it. In Chicago, sirens were background noise. Inside, she poured him chamomile tea and checked his oxygen. His fingers trembled when he reached for hers. "Nadine," he said softly, "promise me something." "Depends on what you're asking. If anything happens to me, don't believe everything you hear." Her brow furrowed. "Craig, what?" But he only smiled, faintly. "You'll understand someday." The next day, she didn't see his curtains open. The porch light stayed off. Something felt wrong. By sunset, rain streaked her windshield as she pulled into his driveway. The moment she stepped out, the world erupted in chaos. Flashing ambulance lights, paramedics shouting, neighbors gathering. "What happened?" she cried, running up the walk. A paramedic turned. "Are you family?" I'm his neighbor. I take care of him." He hesitated, scanning her face. He called 911 himself. Chest pains. He's conscious, but weak. Nadine followed them inside, heart hammering as they wheeled Craig out on a stretcher. His eyes fluttered open when he saw her. "You came," he whispered, his lips barely moving. "Of course I did." She gripped his hand until they forced her to let go. As the ambulance doors slammed, a gust of rain hit her face like cold needles. That's when she saw it. Through the flashing lights, a police cruiser pulling up behind the ambulance. 2 officers stepped out. Why would the police be here for a medical call? Her stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. At St. Mary's Hospital, everything felt too bright, too sterile. Nadine paced the waiting area, her scrubs damp from the storm. A nurse finally approached. "You can see him now, Ms. Brown." Inside, Craig looked pale but calm, wires and tubes running across his chest. "You scared me half to death," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "Wouldn't be the first time I've done that." Before she could reply, the ER doctor entered, clipboard in hand, voice tight with protocol. "Mr. Crawford," he began, "we've received your records from Chicago General. There's been a development. We'll need to notify the authorities." The words hit like a punch. Craig's eyes closed. "It was only a matter of time," he murmured. "What are you talking about?" Nadine asked, stepping forward. But Craig said nothing. Only the beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, slow, steady, ominous. Outside, the hallway flickered with red and blue light. If you've ever cared for someone who never told you the whole truth, the kind of care that costs you sleep, time, and peace, stay with this story. Because sometimes the truth doesn't break your heart. It reveals who it really belongs to. Rain drummed against the hospital windows like it was trying to wash the city clean. But nothing could wash away the chill crawling through Nadine's bones. Craig, or Mr. Crawford, as the hospital still called him, lay motionless in the recovery unit at St. Mary's. The heart monitor pulsed steadily, but everything else about him seemed gone. When the doctor returned, his tone had changed. Professional, distant. "Miss Brown," he said quietly. "Mr. Crawford's medical records didn't match what he told us. His insurance, his emergency contacts, they all lead back to a different name." Nadine frowned. "What do you mean, a different name?" The doctor sighed. "Michael Hensley. Chicago General has him listed under that identity, but he disappeared from their system nearly 2 years ago." "Disappeared?" "Vanished," the doctor said simply. "No forwarding address, no family listed." Her breath caught. "You're saying he's been living under a fake name?" "I'm saying," the doctor replied, "that the police will want to talk to him as soon as he wakes up." Hours later, Nadine sat by his bed as the city outside grew quieter. She thought about the man who smiled at her doorstep every evening, who complimented her soup, who asked her about her dreams like they mattered. Who was he, really? When his eyes finally opened, she was the first thing he saw. "You stayed," he rasped. "Of course I stayed," she said softly. "But you need to tell me the truth, Craig, if that's even your name." He winced, turning his head away. "It's not." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. "My real name," he said at last, "is Michael Hensley." She blinked. "Why lie? Why move here and pretend to be someone else?" His voice cracked. "Because I didn't have a choice." As he spoke, the monitor beeped softly beside them, like a slow metronome marking the rhythm of regret. "I was an accountant," he said. "Worked for a children's cancer foundation in downtown Chicago. One day I found out the CEO, my boss, was embezzling money from the donations. Millions of dollars meant for sick kids." Nadine's stomach turned. "You reported him?" "I tried, but he had friends in high places, board members, politicians, donors. The moment I spoke up, he flipped the story. Said I was the one stealing." He closed his eyes. By the time I realized how deep it went, it was too late. My name was ruined. My wife left. I lost everything. And then the stress, he gestured weakly to his chest. My heart gave out, so I ran, changed my name, tried to disappear. Nadine stared at him, her voice trembling. "You didn't deserve that." He laughed bitterly. Maybe I did. I could have fought harder. I just didn't have the strength anymore. She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. And now, they found me again, he whispered. And I honestly don't know if they're coming to clear my name or to arrest me. The air in the room felt too thin, too sharp. For a long moment, Nadine said nothing. Then she spoke softly, the way she did when calming patients during her night shifts. "Michael," she said, using his real name for the first time. "You've been running from ghosts. Maybe it's time to stop." He smiled faintly. Funny, coming from a woman who never slows down long enough to live her own life. That made her pause. He wasn't wrong. For years, she'd worked double shifts to keep up with bills, taking care of everyone, except herself. Helping him had felt different. It was the first time in a long time she felt seen. Maybe that's why she couldn't walk away now. Later that night, Nadine stepped into the hospital hallway. The rain had stopped, but her mind hadn't. She found herself at the nurse's station, staring at Michael's file, an inch-thick folder with his real name printed in bold. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were medical notes, but also a Chicago PD memo. Subject of open investigation, embezzlement case under federal review. Her throat went dry. A nurse passing by gave her a look. "You okay, Nadine?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just trying to understand something." But she didn't understand. She only knew one thing. The man she'd been feeding soup to every night might not just be sick. He might be wanted. When she returned to his room, he was awake again, staring out the window at the city lights. "You read it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. She froze. It's okay," he said. "You should know what kind of person you've been wasting your time on." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You're not some criminal." "How do you know?" "Because I see you," she said fiercely. "You're not running from guilt, Michael. You're running from grief." He looked at her for a long time, then smiled sadly. "You sound like someone who still believes in good people." "Maybe I have to," she said. "If I stop, who'll take care of the next neighbor who needs me?" He turned away, eyes wet. "Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't lose your heart trying to save someone else's. If you've ever tried to save someone who was already halfway gone, someone whose truth was heavier than your love, then you know this feeling. It's easy to judge, harder to stay, but staying, that's what makes stories like this real. If you're still here, maybe you're the kind of heart this world needs more of." By morning, the police would arrive, and when they did, Nadine would learn the hardest truth of all. Some people can't be saved, not because they're bad, but because life never gave them a chance to believe they deserved saving. The next morning, Chicago woke gray and unfeeling. The city's rhythm, sirens, traffic, cold wind off Lake Michigan, kept moving like nothing had changed. But Nadine couldn't breathe. When she pulled into the St. Mary's Hospital parking lot, 2 squad cars were already there. The blue and red lights reflected off the rain-slick pavement like broken promises. Inside, a uniformed detective was standing by Michael's bed. He looked every bit the part. Mid-40s, square jaw, eyes that had seen too much. His badge read, Chief Daniel Rourke. He turned as Nadine entered. "You must be Ms. Brown," he said flatly. She nodded, trying to steady her voice. "He's my neighbor. What's happening?" Rourke glanced at his notepad. "Mr. Crawford, Mr. Hensley, is wanted for questioning in a reopened fraud case. Federal money, charity embezzlement. We've confirmed his identity. Chicago PD has been looking for him for almost a year." "He's sick," Nadine said. "You can't just Ma'am, Rourke interrupted, his voice clipped. We're not arresting him today, but we do need his statement. The Bureau will decide what happens next. Michael sat propped against his pillows, pale but calm. It's okay, Nadine, he murmured. Let them do their job. Rourke's eyes softened a little. You know, if you'd just stayed in touch, Hensley, we could have avoided this. Michael smiled faintly. If I'd stayed in touch, I'd be dead. That night, the hospital room felt smaller than ever. Machines beeped softly. Rain pressed against the window. Nadine sat in the corner, her arms crossed, unable to look at him. You think I'm a liar, he said quietly. I think you didn't trust me, she shot back. All those nights, all those stories. You made me believe you were just some man trying to survive. You never said you were a fugitive. He sighed. I wasn't running from the law. I was running from what it turned me into. Which is? A coward, he said simply. I let people think I was guilty because it was easier than fighting for the truth. I didn't want to drag anyone else into it, especially someone like you. She finally looked up. Someone like me? You don't get it, he said. You still believe in second chances. People like me don't. The tension between them thickened. At last, Nadine stood and grabbed her bag. I should go. You clearly have things to sort out. Nadine, she froze at the door, tears threatening. I gave you my time, my food, my care, she whispered. And you gave me half the truth. Do you have any idea how that feels? Michael swallowed hard. Like betrayal. Exactly. He nodded slowly. Then maybe now you understand why I ran. Everyone I ever loved felt that way too. Her breath caught, but she didn't turn around. I'm not them, Michael. I know, he said softly. That's why it hurts. For the next 2 days, Nadine didn't visit. She tried to throw herself into work at Mariano's grocery and her night shifts at St. Mary's, but her thoughts kept circling back to that room. His pale face, the way he said her name like it meant something. When she finally caved and returned, the bed was empty. Panic rose in her throat. She rushed to the nurse's station. Where's Mr. Hensley? The nurse hesitated. He was transferred early this morning to Northwestern Memorial for evaluation. The police escorted him. Escorted? Nadine echoed. The nurse nodded. Yeah. He insisted on going quietly. Nadine's knees nearly gave out. She drove straight to Northwestern through light snow. The time she reached the cardiac floor, Chief Rourke was waiting. You shouldn't be here, Ms. Brown, he said. I'm not leaving until I see him. Rourke studied her for a long moment. You care about him. I wouldn't have given him 3 months of my life if I didn't, she said sharply. He nodded slowly. Then you deserve to know. He's been cleared. She blinked. What? Federal investigators found evidence his boss framed him. Email records, hidden ledgers, everything. He's not guilty. The DA is drafting a full exoneration order. Tears filled her eyes. So he's free? Rourke hesitated. Free, but not safe. His heart's failing faster than we thought. He's refusing the transplant list. Nadine's voice broke. Why? He said he's tired of running, even from death. She burst into his room. Michael looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected her to come back. You idiot, she choked. You're giving up now, when you finally got the truth. He smiled faintly. It's enough for me, Nadine. I just wanted to die clean. She grabbed his wrist. Don't you dare say that. You fought so hard to live. He looked at her, eyes glistening. No, you fought. I just borrowed your strength for a while." Her tears finally fell. "You can't do this to me." He brushed a trembling finger across her cheek. "I already did. If you've ever begged someone to keep living, even when they've already given up, then you know this ache. The kind that lingers long after the beeping stops, the kind that makes you wish you could hold on tighter. Maybe that's why stories like this exist, to remind us that sometimes the smallest mercy is not walking away. If your heart's still with her right now, maybe it's because it's meant to be." As the monitor slowed, Nadine pressed her forehead against his hand and whispered through her tears, "You're not alone, Michael. Not anymore." He smiled weakly, closing his eyes. "Then I can rest." The screen went flat, and in that moment, surrounded by sterile light and silence, Nadine realized love wasn't about saving someone. It was about showing up even when the ending was already written. For 2 days, the world went quiet. No ambulance sirens, no beeping monitors, no sound except the slow hum of grief filling Nadine's small duplex. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the empty mug across from her, the one she used to set out for him every evening. 2 sugars, no cream, he'd say, even though his doctor told him to cut back. Now it just sat there, untouched. Outside, Chicago's winter sun struggled to push through the clouds. Snow dusted the sidewalks, muffling the world in white. Then came the knock. When Nadine opened the door, a woman in a gray cardigan stood holding a small box. "Miss Brown, I'm from St. Mary's Hospital. Michael, Mr. Hensley, left this for you." Her chest tightened. "Left?" The woman nodded softly. "Before he passed, he asked us to make sure you received it." She handed her the box and left before Nadine could ask anything more. Inside was a sealed envelope and a small brass key. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. "Dear Nadine, you once told me your mama said you had healing hands. She was right. You healed more than my heart. You healed the part of me that stopped believing good people existed. I didn't tell you everything. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to remember me as the man you believed I could be. The key belongs to a safety deposit box at First Union Bank on Wabash Avenue. Inside, you'll find something that belonged to the life I ran from. I hope you'll use it to build something worth running to. Thank you for seeing me when the world had already forgotten I existed. You were my last truth. Michael Hensley." The next morning, Nadine drove downtown through a soft snowfall. First Union Bank loomed between glass towers, its brass doors reflecting the gray winter light. In the quiet of the vault, a clerk handed her a small safety deposit box. Inside was a worn leather notebook, thick with the folded papers and old ink stains. She opened it carefully. Each page was filled with names and dollar amounts, families of sick children, parents with hospital bills, foundations she recognized from the hospital. At the back, several uncashed checks lay clipped together. The final page stopped her cold. "I couldn't save everyone, but you helped me remember why I tried." Her tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink. That night, she sat by her window, the city lights flickering like distant stars. She could almost hear his voice again, low, tired, gentle. "You don't give up easy, do you?" "No," she whispered to the empty room. "Not when someone needs me." And just like that, she knew what she had to do. 6 months later, Bronzeville, Chicago. The old corner cafe on 43rd Street had been vacant for years, until Nadine bought it. Now, the sign above the door read, "Hensley Hearts." Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. Volunteers bustled between tables where seniors, veterans, and single parents sat laughing, eating, being seen. On the wall hung a photo of Michael, the man she'd known as Craig Crawford, smiling faintly, eyes kind and haunted. Nadine wore a white volunteer apron as she poured coffee for an elderly man in a plaid coat. 2 sugars, no cream, she said softly. He chuckled. That's exactly how I take it. I know, she smiled. Everyone deserves to be remembered. Later that evening, the little cafe buzzed with energy as a group of local teenagers came in after school. Among them was a shy black teenage girl named Alana Brooks, who'd lost her mother to cancer the previous year. She hovered by the counter, hesitant. Nadine smiled warmly. You new here? Alana nodded. Yeah, my counselor said you help people who don't really have anyone. Well, she's right, Nadine said, handing her a steaming cup of cocoa. What's your name? Alana. Welcome to the family, Alana. For the first time in a long time, the girl smiled. As the evening wound down, a woman entered holding a small girl in her arms. The child had a heart monitor strapped to her chest. Are you the lady who helps people? The woman asked. Nadine knelt to the little girl's height. I try, she said softly. The girl giggled. My name's Lila. Nadine froze for a moment, not because of the name, but because the child's eyes had the same pale warmth as Michael's. That's a beautiful name, Nadine whispered. Do you like stories? Lila nodded. Then sit with me. I'll tell you one about a man who taught me that kindness doesn't die. It just changes hands. The cafe lights dimmed. Outside, snow drifted quietly over Chicago's streets, blanketing the city in calm. Nadine stood by the window, watching people laugh and eat inside the place she built from grief. Chief Rourke, now retired, stopped by occasionally to drop off donations. He'd be proud of you, you know, he said once, sipping his coffee. She smiled faintly. He taught me how to see people. I just kept looking. Weeks later, as she was cleaning up after an event, she found a folded note wedged inside the donation box. No name, just a line written in familiar slanted handwriting. Thank you for keeping your promise. Her breath caught. Somehow, she knew. She placed her hand over the note, closed her eyes, and whispered, You're welcome, Michael.